Yep, we are now streaming live.
Just trying to stream. I cannot see it yet.
We are live now.
Okay, great.
We are now streaming live. Yep, we are now streaming live.
Super. Just a second. So can we start? Or should we wait a little bit?
I think we can start now. Maybe in a minute or so. At five.
Just give me a signal, okay?
Will do.
Yeah.
I think we can start now. It's 5:05. So.
Okay. So my name is Kirill Kaem, and I'm Senior VP of Skolkovo Foundation. I'd like to talk to you guys. Does it have sense, really, the beginning of your career, to find the interesting startup or to found interesting startup and to risk your early stage career in order to get the brilliant and the best experience you can get in your early ages? That goes at least at my point of view and my angle, and I can explain why do I think that I have the right to propose such type of development of your career and your first steps in the big world. So I'm working during our presentations. I'd like to talk why Skolkovo Foundation has the right to talk about tech startups and how does it work in general. What are tech startups and what is its specifics of the tech startups? What are the stages of startup development and what are the funding cycles of tech startup? Because everything we do as a tech start goes about not only about the tech, not only about to make the world a better place, as a well-known joke for one of the series about the tech start, but definitely about the money. And actually, what are the startups can do for the economy overall, and what are the open innovation concepts and how it works internally for the corporations now. At the end of our discussion, I'd like to answer the question, does it have sense, and what do you need personally in order to work for the startups and to make this step to this area of tech entrepreneurship? So coming to the Skolkovo Foundation and why actually I have the right to talk about the startups. Skolkovo Foundation is the biggest institution in Russian Federation, which works as the agency nearby the government in order to support tech and innovation transformation of Russian economy. Actually, we are a support institution handling more than 2,500 startups all over the country. And those startups founded not only by Russian citizens, but as well about 20% of those startups founded by international citizens from a bunch of the countries, including UK. We are starting to work with the startups at the very early stage. Actually, our main role is to cover the Death Valley. We will talk about later what is Death Valley, but most probably most of you already know what is that. But nevertheless, while we are starting from the very beginning, from the very early stage, actually we are not working with the startups even from the beginning. We are working with the groups of scientists from the different scientific institutions and research institutions. We are pulling over all the cycles of the development of the startups till the moment they actually entering the market. And the foundation started to work about 10 years ago. And right now, the startups are already generating revenue over 1.5 billion US dollars, which is, I would say, the nice result, especially talking about the specific and the size of the Russian economy. Those startups, and that's revenue only for 2019, I mean, only for 1 year. And the total investments in the startups, again, only for 2019, overcome 200 million US dollars. We are talking about 36 young, and not only young, by the way, entrepreneurs and scientists working, developing new product. Actually, we are limiting them, and we do support the startups, which only the startups which makes own research and own development only. So there is no like barber shops. So that's only tech startups. And it's very good KPI, key performance indicator. We are talking about the IP protection documents, and that's more than 1,500 IP protection documents a year. We are working not only with the startups. Another pillar for us, and that's also very important to understand when you decide to go for the startup development, industrial partners. You see the Skolkovo Foundation working with the deep tech startups. And that means that we do choose only the startups which can get through our expert panel. And our expert panel is more than 800 scientists in different scientific areas. The rejection rate for the startups who want to be Skolkovo resident and who actually want to be in our ecosystem is 75%. So we are very much about deep tech, and we are very picky about deep tech. So that gives us the very good opportunity to propose to our partners potential tech, which is actually has uniqueness worldwide, and that's IP protected. And definitely that's mostly product which are B2B product and much less B2C product. So we have the community of investors around our foundation. We are not the investment foundation. We do support startups, but we have other guys sitting on the bunch of the money who are investing in the startups. But the quality of the portfolio of Skolkovo Foundation is such high that about 40% of tech VC deals are done with the Skolkovo resident startups. And as well, we have the university, and that's among 10 best young tech universities over the world. It's called Skoltech. It's a small university. It's only PhD degree, and it's actually copy-paste MIT models. We have an agreement with MIT, and a lot of curriculums and some professors actually initially was taken from MIT, which allows us actually develop very good university for the very short period of time. If you compare with Edinburgh history, we are talking about only 10 years old university, and that's already on the very good ratings all over the world. So we are also building innovation cities, and our startups are spread all over the country, but nevertheless about 500 startups right now situated nearby the Moscow innovation city called Skolkovo. We see ourselves as the service provider, and we provide different set of the services, including financial, tax and customs benefit, grant financing, connections with the different type of investors, business angels, NVCs, and strategic investors. We are providing a bunch of acceleration programs for the different stages of maturity of the startup, starting from the very beginning on the initial stage and coming very much to the later stage when we and employees of the foundation acts like sales directors, even for some startups, and participating in the sales of the product of the corporate clients. We have a special services, which is very important. I underline it times, intellectual property protection, and we helps our startups to sell the tech. So we are making M&A process for them if they are going to sell the product to the corporate or the company to the big corporate client, or out licensing services as well if the company sells only, startup sells only the IP. And definitely we want our startups to be concentrated more on research and development. That's why we provide the full set of business services, legal services, bookkeeping, finance services, PR and media support, and we have the bunch of infrastructure for our startups to use. I've been talking that we are very much concentrated on deep tech startup, and my today's talk is more about deep tech history and why it's interesting to work for the deep tech startups. What is deep tech? Actually, it's a number of cutting edge and very interesting and very perspective technologies. and they're very close to the scientific areas. So it's like yesterday science, and the people who are starting this type of the startups, they usually a year ago, 2 years ago, they've been sitting somewhere in the big university making scientific research. That's engineering, because for the next step to make science from, to make the tech from science, you need engineering skills, mathematics, physics, and medicine. So all the fundamental science, basic science are involved. Hot topics today is mathematics and especially and IT, and especially in the areas of artificial intelligence and deep learning platforms and machine learning platforms. So it's like a hot pies. I mean, everybody wants this right now, all the big corporations, all the small corporations. Deep technology startups, it's companies founded based on the very good and scientifically proven scientific discovery. So that means when we are looking for the good startups here, we are checking what articles the team has produced before, based on articles in this specific science magazine with very high impact factor. And only in this case, if it's proven that science does work, only in this case we can support the startup. We want to support the startups. What's important, and that's very funny kind of example. So the most of technology companies, and when we are talking about Silicon Valley, for example, the most of the technologies companies, that's not about deep tech. Very seldom deep tech companies are presented. The most of them, it's kind of marketing or business innovation, new business models. I have a couple of examples here. When Zuckerberg actually found the way to create Facebook, it was not deep tech at all. So most probably we wouldn't support this type of innovation, despite this excellent marketing success, which allowed right now Facebook to use a lot of deep tech. And one of our clients who are actually searching for the new deep tech solutions for existing business. The same as Uber. I mean, that's again, the commercial model is excellent, but initially it was like a very simple digital intermediate system between the seller of the service and the buyer of the service. So right now they're building it more, but at the initial stages, it was nothing about deep tech. And this type, I mean, all the Silicon Valleys and support institutions of the world, they're very much filled in with this type of the marketing innovation startups, which is not our case. We would like actually to play high risk, high reward game. And the bottleneck of the deep tech startup are always the investor. The problem is that the core value early stage deep tech startup is IP. That means if the investor would like to risk some money and to play this game, they need to get very competent opinion if the tech would work. It's not about the market yet, but on the and there is a difference in the tech startup and the classical marketing startup because tech expertise and deep tech expertise has to be done from the very beginning, because even if there is a demand on the market for this type of the service or the product, but tech doesn't work, you waste your money even for the marketing research. So first, the tech has to be checked. That's why the investors who are dealing with deep tech startups, they're creating special scientific boards and involving scientists to understand if tech is working. And that's why usually the VCs or business angels or private equity funds, which are specialized in deep tech, they're dealing with certain technological areas, and they're not making any left-right steps. They're dealing only with biomed, or only with deep learning systems, or only with the new materials, and they're trying to keep the focus on the certain technology because they need to keep the scientific expertise within the organization or next to the organization. Talking about Skolkovo, we are talking about 2,500 startups plus, and we have some industrial areas covered by the deep tech findings we got through all over the world. So as I mentioned, it's not only Russian deep tech within our portfolio. So we have everything starting from medical devices and new pharmaceuticals. Definitely for Russian Federation, which is specific, we have oil and gas industry very well represented here. And definitely the Skolkovo startups providing these services, not only for the Russian oil and gas company, but as well for the biggest players all over the world. New materials is very interesting, but you see a lot of tech right now is keen to digitalization and the digital transformation. So that's why we have so many IoT, AI, Internet of Things, or artificial intelligence startups, big data, or IT security startups, which are pretty much successful. So the reasons for this is Russia traditionally has a very strong IT and mathematician guys, and for us it's much easier to find the leads in the scientific institutions for the future development of the future startups. So the classical curve of the startup development stages is here on this slide. And in the classical startups, before a minimum viable product, the problem has to be identified, and the solution is to be proposed for the problem. As I mentioned before, for the deep tech startup is slightly different. Sometimes startups the idea starts not from the identification of the problem, but the idea starts from the scientific findings. And in many cases, these scientific findings they're still only mentioned in some very nice article in Lancet magazine or Nature magazine, and nothing going forward. And that's a very seldom circumstances when the same person who make the scientific research can understand the market need and can come to the idea of the product based on the scientific research which is made. So, and usually it needs a couple of persons to bring it together. So, and at the beginning of the initial stage of the startup, we usually have the scientist who made the basic idea and who made the science itself and already proved that science is working. And sometimes accidentally, sometimes with the help of organization like us, we bring together another person who has the entrepreneurial ideas, and even not only like entrepreneurial ideas and entrepreneurial skills, but as well the marketing vision for the potential for this certain science can be made as a product, can be made as a technologies. And this stage for the deep tech startup, the initial stage, is usually takes longer. It's not like in a very nice IT marketing startup, which you need like a couple of meetings, maybe 3-4 months in order to start and prepare MVP. For deep tech startups, it can take a year or 2 years just to bring this much together. So when companies start, MVP is slightly different for the different tech areas, and MVP for the biotech, let's say, it's early stage preclinical studies, which is not even can be booked as for the future registration studies of the drug. So just need to get the proof of concept that mechanic does work. For the new material, for example, it's laboratory tests and laboratory production of this new material in order to get this material not even on the prototype phase, but only on the lab phase. But as soon as this type of MVP in the deep tech startups overcome, we can bring the first initial money in the product, and we can actually start to finance the product. When MVP is ready, actually for the deep tech startup, sometimes it's not like one pivot. You know what pivot is? It's actually changing the product completely, trying to make a better market fit. But sometimes it's few pivots of the product. And at the first stage, the company is trying to bring even different MVPs for the different market fits to find the better clients and the better auditorium for this product. Then optimizing the funnel is searching for the channel product fit. So what are the clients and where who actually can buy the product? In the most of the cases, we are talking about B2B products. So we are looking for the certain corporate need. And sometimes it's not the final product. Sometimes it's like a part of the production process or the business process or one of the materials, sometimes very tiny, which can increase the effectiveness of the final product of the corporate client. And then when this match is found, there are a few different options for the startup, but we will discuss it later. But for any options, it has to be done with the massive financing for upscaling the product and for bringing this product on the maturity level when the product can get into the market. So the failure risk of the startups on each of the stage is very high. For the deep tech startups, failure rates are much higher than for the marketing type of the startups. The most drastic example of this is the biomed startups. We just can imagine that biomed usually for the pharmaceutical products takes about 2 to 3 billion US dollars to bring the idea from the early preclinical stage down to the product on the shelf. And the success rate for this type of the product, somewhere in between from 2 to 3%. And the problem is biomed as well, that the failure rate round by round definitely decreasing, but not so fast as some other tech. So sometimes we know examples when the product is already on the market, get through all the tests, animal tests, human tests, at the end of the day that recalled from the market because of the problems which we are not seeing from the very beginning. And that's like a risk for the health of the people. The IT startups and early stage IT startups success rate is different if we are discussing about MVP stage of early stage IT startups. That more or less 10% of those would come to the final product and gonna be on the market with a different level of success. So if you are going to be in IT startups, you are running much less risks, but at the same time, risk is always paid. So for the biomed startups, the multiples can overcome 20 or even 30 times for the founder or early stage investor compare. I mean, you almost never would get it for the IT startups. It's always less. And that makes it interesting. And as well, it's interesting that for this type of the startups, which has a very social type of innovation, a very, social type of the product and high social effects like drugs or medical equipment or education, for example, especially if education, which is very much on hype right now. So deep tech educational startup, including AI, is very hot. So, and for this type of the product on the early stage, usually those startups very much supported by the governments all over the world. So like an example here, NIH, National Institute of Health in the United States spends about 20 billion US dollars a year for the support of early stage biomed and biotech startups. Talking about the fundings and the funding pathways of the startups, that's a classical chart again. And this chart is already changing from year to year. And we know those examples. So initially, the startup starts from the very beginning as the idea and the unmet demands of the market. And the startup has to come over the valley of death and come to the break even. And during this pre-seed stage and seed stage, usually for pre-seed, the major of the investors are either FFF, which is the friends, family and fools. I mean, the private investor, which are not professional, but just like the team, like the person, like the idea, and ready to risk. And for the later stage, the seed funds and professional business angels join the party and give some money in order to get return on investment. So the most of the FFFs, they do not expect really too much return on investment on this stage. And then you can see that there is a break even for the startups here on this chart, which is not actually the truth anymore. It's changing very fast, and you can see a couple of examples from big IT companies, like recent examples, I don't know, Facebook or Snapchat. All those guys, I mean, they've been pretty far from the break even when they get early stage and later stage and all type of investments, and even some of them get IPO investments. Another example, when the company can bring a lot of money on the table before any break-even is even foreseeable in the next 5-7 years, it's Biomet again, because the first and the second round, early stage investment and even IPOs can be done based on the clinical trials and preclinical trials data, and that's pretty far from the market yet, but the people are ready to involve its own money, and there are some specialized financial institutions who are created specifically for this, who are risking the money, providing the VC and post-VC financing for the companies which are not even gonna be at the market at all, because everybody understands the risks. But nevertheless, the reward is so high that in case one of those products is a blockbuster, the reward's going to be multiples 10, 20, and over, depending on the stage when the investors are entering in. IPO is a classical way again, but public market is not only the exit strategy for the startup or for the VC fund. So more and more corporations, and it's not only for Biomet, it's always been classical, but more and more corporations right now are interested in getting new tech, not developing it internally, but buying this tech from outside. So in many cases, startups or IP of the startups it's sold before the company decides to make IPO. And that goes mostly for B2B business. And what's also important to mention here, when we are talking about all type of the investors, and maybe only we can exclude FFFs, those investors are bringing not only the money, but as well they're bringing the competences. And depending on the type of the investors, they can bring either marketing competences or corporate structure and corporate management competences. And a lot of conflicts are based on that actually when the big investor is coming and institutional investor is coming to the startup, they're actually pulling the plug and trying to change the management in the startup. And the founder for the deep tech startup, usually the founder is a scientist, become not the CEO, which he always been dreaming of, but becoming CTO or CDO, I mean, Chief Technology Officer or Chief Digital Officer, depending on the startup. And there are a lot of conflicts around this one. And the one of the art which I mean, investor need to involve in this type of relationship with the startups, how to do it soft and how to not to destroy the team in order to bring startup for the future success. Talking about the funding and venture and pre-venture stages. So pre-seed, usually it's the valuation of the startup around 100K. I'm taking the currency, like, which is more universal, the US dollars. And usually the pre-seed would bring during fundraising from 50 to 200,000 US dollars. As I mentioned, pre-seed usually are FFFs. What's interesting, that's not only the private people here as well. A lot of institution and support institution providing different type of the finance support for this type of early stage startups, in case if the tech due deal goes well. And Skolkovo is one of those organizations. For example, we are co-investing or co-financing business angels who are ready to get some money for the startups who get through our expertise as a good tech startup. We are giving we are giving the same amount as the private investor is involving in, and we are not diluting neither shares of the founders nor share of those investors. So it's just like a governmental support for this type of investment for the good tech startups. And similar type of institutions existing all over the world, including the States, definitely UK, European Union. So everybody understands that this type of early stage startup is a good tech ought to be supported. So for the seed valuation, there are already funds and people who are looking for return on investment. They are already interested in the multiples they get for the money they invested. And the usual valuation of this type of the startups around 5 million US, when with the fundraising about 3 to 5 million US dollars. Then there are a few different VC rounds depending on the maturity of the startup, starting from MVP and going through the first sales. But it depends on the tech. For the IT startups, round A means there are already some sales. Break-even is not reached, but some sales out there, and the sales trend is positive. For the round B, the company has to be already very close to break-even on the break-even, and round C, actually, it's the scaling up the business. So for round B is between 10 to 30 million, with a fundraising about 15 to 20 million. For round A, for round B is fundraising around 30 to 40 million. And round C is fundraising 50 and over. So actually between 50 and 100 million US dollars for the upscaling the business, which already bringing the profits to the founders. And then there is an exit strategy for the venture investors, and in many cases for the founder of the startups. And that's either IPO, which is the brilliant deal and expensive deal, I would say. To prepare IPO, it's not easy, and it needs to take some investments from the venture investors in order to prepare IPO. And valuation of those companies actually overcome 150 million. And funding for those type of the startups is about 100 million US dollars. But again, IPO is not only the way to exit. So the founder can get the, cash out to get the money for the work he's been doing from 3 to 15 years, depending on the type of the startup. Also, the strategic investor or institutional investor can be the way. So it's the company which is already not only they give the money for the development of the startup, but already gave to pay out the founder. Right now, let's talk about the open innovation concept. Because you see, if you take the situation about 20 or 30 years ago, all those startups was actually for the tech nerds, tech freaks, and all those guys who've been starting in 70s in the Valley. They've been very much about the fast-moving tech, and that's the big corporation actually been surprised how the competition growth overcome its own growth. And they've been not expecting so many small enterprises who can compete with the big monsters. And nevertheless, they, about 15 years ago, they reoriented and they understood in order to survive, they need to compete with these small mammals. So dinosaurs need to compete with those mammals. And they changed the approach, and they still wanted to have the very high concentration of the economic power in transnational corporations, and leaders right now are still international companies. But in order to compete not on the level of operational effectiveness or on the financial leverage, they need to be more innovative. And for them to keep internal development and internal research, it doesn't always work. First, they need to be more flexible, and in a certain area of tech, I mean, that's the key questions: how flexible you are, how fast you can react on the market, and how fast you can react on the appearance of new tech approaches. And like an example, I mean, you can compare Google versus Apple, and you see it's like one platform is completely closed, and but it's very much oriented on closed hardware as well, which is important. And the second platform is very open, and they accept the risks which open source platform brings to the business. And another example here that's about open source platform, it's 5G telecom revolution is going on right now. You see, there are a few big players like Nokia or Huawei, which had a certain geographical area. So there is a Huawei, Nokia and Ericsson in Europe, there is Huawei in China, and those the company who has most advanced tech right now in 5G, which is the next generation of telecommunication, where the basic tech is already more or less known. But Nokia, Siemens, Huawei, they protected specific solutions for this 5G telecom with the IP protection. It's closed systems. And Russia in the US, the USA, actually right now we do not have the players which local players. Hello? I hope I'm. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, because I got the notification that I'm out of the system. Okay, great. Sorry. So, and neither the USA nor Russia have own tech companies which are able to bring new 5G solutions on the market next 2-3 years. So either we need to buy it from those three players, from China or from Europe, or we need to change something. And that's interesting enough because right now, both Russia and the USA working together in order to make the open source platform for 5G. And that's the plenty of space for the small companies who can develop its own tech, for the startups who can come to this area and to compete with such a big monsters like Huawei. So it's another example when open source rules. So, and so big corporations go for open innovation platform if it's very low entrance barrier for new developers players. So they are not flexible enough to react so fast. And that's why for those markets, they actually prefer to acquire, to buy small developers in case they got something good, or to buy the solution from the small developer. And another option, when the big corporations actually like to buy some early stage startups and do not come to the very deep search for the science, it's high risk early stage projects like biomed or new materials or space, where there is some support of the governments, and the government will never support big corporations. So it would rather support the ecosystems with the small startups. And about 95%, 97% of those startups, they would die. And the big corporation for those startups is exit strategy. And at the same time, big corporations is also in winning position because it's reduced the risks and the cost of the early stage scientific search for those projects. So that's again for the open innovation platform. And but even the company decide to have this internal development as the key part of its own tech. I would say nuclear industry. So usually nuclear industry is less to do with the startups. It's a serious scientific institution behind, very much of basic science behind. But even in these internal departments of those big corporations, the model of communications between the mother corporation, the tech people in the corporation, and for these development and research institutions is completely different right now. So previously it was very much hierarchical. So it's a big corporation told to the developers what to do and how to develop the tech. Right now it's much more entrepreneurship models. So a lot of initiative from research institutions comes not top down, but bottom up. And the new products and new business approaches for the big monsters like Rosatom, that's the world leader in nuke, and that's a Russian company. That's actually, it goes from the very scientific people within corporation, but those scientific people not driven by the science. They're driven very much by the marketing model of the future project or the future tech. And that also kind of changed last 10, 15 years drastically. So, and talking about the open innovation, one more thing I'd like to mention, we've been talking about VC financing and VC models for the startup development and startup financing. All the big corporations, all GE, Airbuses, Boeings, IBMs, buyers of the world, they actually right now have own VC funds. And that's not only to search the future tech and future solution, which can be acquired by the mother corporation, by the main business, but as well, that's very much about the support of innovation ecosystem around the corporation, because even the ideas of the startups who are getting around these corporations or invested by VC funds, they can bring new ideas in communication which can help internal tech development and internal innovation. That's why Skolkovo is dealing a lot with different type of corporate acceleration program and corporate VC program. And you can see some examples here. And definitely you can understand how much deep tech can be found in Bayer with the agri or pharmaceutical products, or AstraZeneca, which is a pharmaceutical, by the way, British player. But the same Visa, which is a fintech, and which is right now, I mean, Russian startups are extremely popular in fintech all over the world. But not only, you know, sometimes it's even like FMCG companies who are searching for the better business processes or even better new products, like Unilever or Heineken, which is it was very nice to have a Heineken a corporate accelerator because the product is nice. So we are running about 30 programs with more than 6,000 startup pitches with those corporate people. And that's, you know, this open innovation model in action. And more than around, right now, it's around 50 plus startups get the financing or get M&A deals with those big corporations. There are some examples of startups and like Vision Labs, and it's a unique face recognition, which is winner of National Institute of Standards and Technology. And right now, those systems are used as a security systems all over the world, including Dubai, UAE, or including Singapore, Russian Federation, definitely. But they're going further. And right now, they're implementing in Moscow Metro the face recognition for the passengers. So you don't need to use any cards or any tags or chips to be recognized. You just get it through the face recognition. As well, one of the biggest banks in Russian Federation use those for the face recognition of the clients. So it's much less risks. So the S innovations, that's also very sophisticated projects. So the previous was AI, obviously a hot topic. This one is the superconductors. You know, the superconductors going to be our future. And what they're doing high temperature superconductors. They are not made the engine, electrical engine on superconductors yet, but right now still the product is already used in leading scientific centers like CERN. They use it in MIT, but even they use it in the regular life, like a protection system for the high load electric grids in Russian Federation. And right now they're starting those type of protectors abroad. So Radix is a hardware and software system for storage and data processing. Solution is used in various industries, but the most interesting those technology was used in many sci-fi pictures. I mean, big screen sci-fi pictures as a technology to work with the video and to back up the video in the high value, high volume, high speed. So Anisoprint. So this company is already commercializing its product all over the world. It's such companies as BMW, Airbus, Safran is using, and that is the composite materials. So actually it's 3D printing, but it's not 3D printing as a regular material, but as well it's a continuous carbon fiber within the 3D model. And that's a very, the product is very light with the actually qualities like metal. I mean, it's flexible, not fragile, and at the same time, it's very strong. Groupib is very well-known cybersecurity system and fraud detection and protection. And they have the office in the USA, they have office in Canada, they have office in Singapore, and they're selling this solution worldwide. I mean, and you know, to have the Russian cybersecurity company successful in the USA nowadays, you need to have a very good tech, because you know that there is some political turmoils about Russian hackers and some boogie image of the Russian IT specialists. Rockflow Dynamics, actually, that's a digital oil service company. They opened the companies in 23 countries. And they're supporting not only Russian companies listed here, but as well Occidental Petroleum, Baker Hughes, Petrofac from UK with their service. And the last but not least, it's one of the successful examples. That's first drug for the therapy of chronic viral hepatitis D. So it was some drugs for hepatitis B, but it was never a drug for hepatitis B. And actually, there are 24 million patients who got no any specific drug previously. And right now, its drug is already registered in Europe, registered in Russia, and we do expect FDA registration this year. So I've been talking about the university. It's a very nice picture, and maybe just at the end, I'd like to answer the question for you. I mean, can I be and won't I be the founder of the startup? And does it, I mean, is it worth the risk to be? You know, from my experience, usually founder is, I mean, of the successful startup, only in 5% of the cases, that's only one person. Because for the deep tech startup, founder, the startup requires to have a very good scientist from the very beginning. But usually the scientist's mind is slightly different. And that's a big conflict here, because the scientist thinks that he's a smart person. In fact, he is, or she is. And to run the business, it's nothing special. It's very simple. If I actually had a very sophisticated scientific research, if I got this result, I mean, it's no problem to run the company. And that's the mistake. Because the mentality of the founder, scientist is the founder, is completely different. The scientist is looking for the new challenges and the game of mind, and he would be actually driven very much by the scientific curiosity. But another approach is to be driven by the market success and the money. And it goes sometimes in opposite direction. So that's why it always requires the two for the good action. And you need to define what are your competences. If you are going to enter this field from the scientific part, and you're going to be scientific part of founders of the company, or your competences are in the marketing area. I'm not talking about the competences in the business area itself or business management. It would need it's definitely needed, but actually the risk, I mean, at the early stage is less about the corporate management, but much more about understanding the market and verifying the tech. So define who you are, either marketing or the scientific person. And if you are strong in one of those two areas, you can start this one, yes, and you can be successful. Do not risk to start the startup if you have only one competence. Find the partner, always find the partner. At the beginning, you need two. For the later stage, you need to add persons who understand business administration, who understand corporate management, and maybe some more narrow area in running the startups. Am I a suitable person to work for the startups? Okay, so again, if you are invited to work for the startup, you need to understand not only the tech which is in the startup, but as well you need to understand what the maturity of the level of the startup it is. And then you can define what your competences are and what you bring to the team and if the team would benefit from it. You have to understand that at the very beginning, the benefits you can get from the startups are close to zero. So most probably it would be minimum wages, especially early stage startup, and you would work for the future. So most probably it would be some kind of option scheme when you get some more shares of the company if the company reaches success, and that's the big chunk you can run for. And you also need to evaluate if your personal situation would allow you to take this risk and actually to be very much involved in the business, to live in the office, to sleep in the office, and other life would be rather humble at the very beginning, at least. Am I going to be rich? Yes, you can be rich, definitely. But you know, with the startups, it's the same as the big artists or big actors. There are hundreds and thousands and million artists and actors all over the world, but only single of them are famous and only single of them are successful and rich. And the ratio is very, very similar. So if you're successful, again, high risk, high reward model. If you're successful, you're gonna be crazy rich. You would never be so rich in your corporate career. But in many cases, you will fail. And that's the answer for the last question. Why to risk? You know, the experience you can get during your work for or founding or owning the startups, you would never get in the corporation, because you're gonna be self-driven, universal person. Otherwise, you wouldn't survive at all. And your skills would be much more universal compared to the corporate career, where you need to focus on the certain area of responsibilities. And you know, the failure is a very good result for the startup while you are young, because if you wouldn't start now and you wouldn't try this startup atmosphere and knowledge and risks, you would never do it again. Because I mean, if you imagine yourself in 20 years from now, most probably it would be the family, the mortgage, the house, some social position. And it's most probably wouldn't come to the startup from that point. So you need to try it right now. And I would say that big corporations, with a person who has an experience in the startup, they have a very sweet tooth on those type of person, especially if you want to work with the tech and with innovation, because they want those type of entrepreneurs with own experience in own innovation departments, which are entrepreneurial driven right now. And so my wish to you, and try it. I mean, you have a very good time right now to try it. And definitely, if you wouldn't try it now, then when? So I'm done. Thank you very much. Maybe last picture. If you are by chance in Russian Federation, come to Skolkovo. That's a very nice and beautiful innovation city with a good universities, good technopark. Even Zaha Hadid architects are there, so you will see some iconic buildings and very nice park, and definitely the people are around. That's about innovation, startups, and new tech. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Kirill, for that lovely talk. I'm sure people would have learned a lot from that.
So I can quit now, yeah?
Yeah, that's
Thank
fine.
you.
Oh, Kirill, another question I wanted to ask was, so these talks get recorded by default, but we can delete them. So would you like the recording to stay up, or would you like us to delete the recording?
No problem, you can stay up.
It can stay up. All right, perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.